A very warm good morning to you and welcome to the Health Discourse Show, the conversations that heal with me, Sasha Elizabeth, your weekly guide to informed practical conversations on health and well-being. Now today we turn our focus to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, a condition that is increasingly discussed yet widely misunderstood. And joining me in this conversation is none other than Dr. Linus Oyugi. I'll just briefly introduce him to you, allow him to introduce himself, where he comes from, what he does, before we can kick off our conversation. Good morning, Dr. Linus.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for creating time for this conversation.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
Great. Is it your first time, right?
First time here? Yes.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, sure. Much appreciated. Great. So for the person who is watching you for the first time, who is Dr. Linus Oyugi? What do you do? Where are you coming from?
Linus Oyugi is a clinical psychologist. I work at Chiromo Hospital Group, which is a private level 5 psychiatric facility in Kenya. As a matter of fact, the only level 5 psychiatric facility in the country. I deal with mental health, but we also do corporate mental health. We also do talks for corporate organizations about mental health. Yeah.
Wow, great. So thank you for creating time for this conversation. And as usual, we allow you to weigh in on the conversation. Any question around ADHD, feel free, and you'll get the response right from the experts here. And of course, our number, you see the numbers popping up on your screen. We have also our social media platforms, so feel free to drop your comments and questions, any kind of feedback on our platforms, and we'll attend to them as and when the time allows. Use the hashtag Health Discourse. Now, first, for starters, Dr. Oyugi, what exactly is ADHD, and how should the public understand it beyond the stereotypes? Because any given medical condition is always marred by some kind of myths around it.
Yeah, so ADHD, just as the initials suggest, is by definition attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's classified as a neurodevelopmental condition. Neurodevelopmental condition basically means that it affects the brain and the nervous system. And people that have ADHD are actually born with it. It's not something that you acquire, you are born with it. Yeah, some people might actually argue that having ADHD is the same as your brain being wired differently. So meaning that people that have ADHD will have certain struggles in day-to-day life, but then they'll also be quite good at certain things. But so basically it's a mixture of both ability and disability. As the name suggests, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, people that have ADHD will struggle with attention, which is attention deficit. By definition is the inability to sustain attention for a long time. So they've got limited ability to sustain attention. For example, so far we've spoken for about 5 minutes, but a person that has ADHD may not be able to sustain attention.
Distracted so fast?
Yeah,
okay.
They get easily distracted. There's also an element of hyperactivity where they may be fidgeting with their hands, they cannot sit still for a long time, they're always up and down. You hear, especially when it comes to children, them getting injured a lot because simply the brain is almost, most of them would report almost feeling like they're driven by a motor. They have to keep moving, even sometimes they cannot think if they're not moving. They have to constantly be moving.
Oh, wow. So what are the key causes of ADHD, and how much of it is genetic versus environmental?
Genetic, yes, plays a huge role. As a matter of fact, if you have parents that have ADHD, there's a statistical chance that you'll also have ADHD, but genetics alone is not important. Usually what happens is that a person can be genetically predisposed, and then there'll be other factors combined. So for example, if you come from a family where there's history of ADHD or something related to ADHD, and maybe you had a very difficult childhood, or there was trauma, then symptoms might manifest to a very severe degree. But the most important thing when it comes to understanding ADHD is genetics. I should also say that although genetics is important, there's been an increasing number of young boys and girls getting diagnosed with ADHD, for example, over the last 10 years, the number of young boys and girls that we're diagnosing with ADHD has more than quadrupled. So right now we have 4 times as many young children and young teenagers and even adults getting diagnosed with the condition as we would have maybe 10 years ago.
What would you attribute that to?
Yeah. Part of the explanation for that is maybe we didn't diagnose enough people who had it. For example, girls almost never diagnose girls with ADHD, because when girls have ADHD, they tend to have the inattentive type. So it's the less obvious. It's the girl that sits very quiet in class, but the problem is that they cannot stay in the moment. So they keep drifting off from the subject of discussion of. So maybe because we've started diagnosing girls, the number has increased. But the other reason could be maybe we are now experiencing the impact of technology. For example, nowadays young kids consume a lot of short-term content on TikTok and on social media. And there seems to be evidence that the more we consume such content, our attention is also getting fragmented. So it's not that people have ADHD, is that maybe the technology that we're using is fragmenting our attentions, and people are now manifesting the symptoms of ADHD when they actually don't have ADHD. Not to say that we don't have people who have ADHD. Yes, we do. But maybe the fact that there's 4 times as many people that we're diagnosing with ADHD today as 10 years ago might be attributable to the fact that we also have technology that's also fragmenting our attention.
Thank you. Now, statistically, what is the prevalence rate of ADHD, and how does is there any specific demographics that are more predisposed to the disorder than others?
Yes, statistically, they say that out of every 10 children in class, at least 2 of them will have a neurodevelopmental condition, specifically attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So talking about more or less 20% of the population. There are some demographics that are more predisposed to ADHD. We used to think that boys are much more likely to get ADHD than girls, but then we found out that that's actually not true. Girls are also just as likely to get ADHD or to be diagnosed with ADHD, it's just that the type of ADHD that they have tends to be different. Boys tend to be very hyperactive and overtly obvious type of ADHD, but girls tend to be quite inattentive. Yeah.
And could you please walk us through some of the core signs and symptoms, especially in children, of ADHD?
So there's generally 3 types of ADHD. We have the predominantly inattentive type. So this is predominantly short attention span. There's also predominantly hyperactive type, and we have the combined type, where a person may have both symptoms of inattention and hyperactivity combined. So that is actually the most common type of ADHD. So the symptoms of inattention may include the things that we've already talked about, like distractibility, short attention span, does not appear to be listening while you're talking to them. So basically, it primarily affects the ability to focus and to pay attention. Hyperactivity is always on the move, feeling like they're driven by a motor. They're constantly fidgeting. They have to walk or move about in order for them to think. So they get injured a lot when they're younger. They may be much more likely to get into physical activities like sports than the average child. And then we have the combined type. We have both symptoms of inattention and hyperactivity. Yeah.
And at what point should a parent or guardian begin to suspect that it may be ADHD and not just normal behavior? Because we know sometimes kids can be really active at a given age, and there are some symptoms that could mimic ADHD, but actually it's a totally a different condition.
Yeah, we also, that's a very good question. We need to be very, very careful, because we do not want to diagnose healthy children with conditions. And you know that ADHD, the first line of treatment for ADHD is medication. You have to give children stimulants. So you have to be very, very careful that we're only giving the kids that actually need the diagnosis. So it's true that boys tend to be much more hyperactive than girls. It doesn't mean that whenever a boy is hyperactive, they actually have ADHD. We have plenty of boys who are hyperactive, and the thing that they need is for you to get them out of their house and take them to a playing ground so that they can use all of that energy and they're okay. So how do we know that a kid has ADHD and it's not normal hyperactivity and also inattention, that you can say that a certain amount of inattention should be considered healthy, is when there's impairment in the important areas of life. And what are the important areas of life of a child? You're talking about education, you're talking about their life at home, and you're talking about you also need to watch them while they're playing. So if you look at this in 3 areas and you figure out that your child is not able to function as other children because of their symptom, then that may warrant a psychiatric intervention, or you get them an evaluation. But if they're studying okay, if they are doing well at home, they're sleeping when you need them to sleep, they are playing well with others, they understand empathy, they understand waiting for their turn and all that, then everything is okay. Everything should be considered to be fine.
Now, does ADHD present differently among adults, particularly those who were never probably diagnosed in childhood?
Oh, yes and no. And you're right that there's a lot of adults who have ADHD and yet they may never know, or they don't know that they have ADHD. They've lived with ADHD all their lives and they've never really gotten a formal diagnosis. They've struggled a lot. You find that especially the smarter type, when a child is very smart and they have ADHD, the teachers may not really pay attention even when they're losing things or they're lacking focus or they're a bit unruly or they're a bit disorganized because they're doing well in education. So such kind of people tend to get undiagnosed. So there's different, the symptoms won't really change much, but because of the change in setting, in school, high school, university, you have something that drives you, you have people to look after you, you have a timetable, so things are much easier. When you still have, if you have ADHD, you'd struggle in those areas, but as an adult, things get a bit difficult because you are now your own boss. You've got to come up with your own schedule, you've got to sort yourself out, and symptoms manifest differently, not because the symptoms are different, but simply because the dynamics have changed. So you find that adults who have ADHD may still struggle with all the things that we've mentioned earlier, but added to that, they may be chronic procrastinators. So they're the type of people that say, I'm going to do this, and they keep postponing it. Or they start projects
for the last minute rush.
Yes, or they start projects, a lot of projects. They always start very enthusiastically, a business, a project, a relationship, but then they falter in between. They always lose interest because people that have ADHD have what we call an interest-based brain. If they're interested in something, they are really going to pay attention. If they're not interested in it, or if the interest diminishes, then they may not be able to complete it. So they may struggle with relationships in terms of not being able to sustain a relationship for a long time. Again, there's something known as object permanence. I don't know if you know about what it means.
What is it about?
So, for example, sure, if you have a child, you've ever played peekaboo with your child, where you hide and then you show up.
Yes.
And so the reason why we do that with children, especially between the ages of 4 and 6, is because we want them to develop what we call object permanence. Object permanence is your belief that something continues to exist even if you can't see it. For example, the guys that were helping us set up for this meeting, we can't see them in this room right now,
know they're somewhere.
but you know that they're somewhere and they exist. So a normal human being will develop object permanence at some point, but turns out that people that have ADHD, they don't develop object permanence like everybody else. So for them, out of sight is out of mind. So that's why if you have a person that has ADHD and you're in a relationship with them, you might worry, why are they not texting me? Why are they not calling me? It's because for them, object permanence hasn't really fully developed, and they may continue to struggle in areas where object permanence is still required.
So does this mean that they can establish another relationship where they are? Just because they feel, okay, this doesn't exist in their mind at that point.
Yes, partly yes. To a certain degree, yes. People that have ADHD tend to have a history of relationships that didn't work. So keep jumping from one relationship with another, from one relationship to another, or just because nowadays we talk about relationships, long distance. They may struggle with long distance relationship because for them they're much more likely to sustain a relationship if they see somebody in front of them, because for them, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned about performance, or especially among children. So that's even in adults. So it is interesting to know that actually some of the people with ADHD are actually intelligent. They perform well despite struggling with attention, which of course normally somebody would think maybe because they have issues with attention,
yes,
it could impact negatively on their performance. Could you shed some light on that?
Absolutely. One of the common features of ADHD is that, or the common stories that we hear from parents and teachers is, my child is very smart. They are very intelligent. If only they could pay attention. If only they could stop distracting others in class. If only they could start finishing their homework. It's the common feature, and there seem to be some correlation between ADHD and also some type of high intelligence. And we know that on average, individuals that get diagnosed with ADHD tend to be better, to be intellectually gifted. We don't know what causes the other. We don't know whether it's intelligence that causes ADHD or ADHD causes intelligence, but there seems to be a correlation between ADHD and intelligence. And like I said, the common feature is people that have ADHD tend to be quite intelligent, but they're not meeting their potential. So this is also one of the reasons why they really, really struggle, because they know that they're capable, but for one reason or another, they're not able to realize their potential. And one of the definitions of good mental health is when a person is able to realize their potential. And ADHD, unfortunately, makes it less likely that a person is going to realize their potential. But thank God, due to current treatment, which is medication and therapy, people can still perform quite well. There's so many examples of people who have ADHD, like Will Smith, who is one of the most famous actors. He has both ADHD and dyslexia. And ADHD and dyslexia hasn't really prevented him from becoming one of the best actors. There's also this famous South African comedian. I keep forgetting his name. He's half white, half black. Also diagnosed with ADHD, and it's doing really well. So yes, I think with proper treatment and proper management, people can still perform to the very best of their ability. Yeah.
Oh, great, thank you. And in today's fast-paced world, we find that so many people struggle with attention. There are so many things to do, especially with the social media, the technology. You find that you want to focus on this, something pops up on your phone. How best can we really distinguish everyday distraction from a clinical condition like ADHD, especially among adults?
I don't think the lay person can do that, and this is why we're here, so that people who already suspect that they may be having symptoms of ADHD can go to a clinical psychologist, can go to a psychiatrist, and we have plenty of those in our facility, and they can get formally evaluated through self-report questionnaires. These are questionnaires that you're given, and based on how you respond to them, we can tell how you're doing, or also through clinical history taking, because we collect proper history from your childhood to where you are at, and then we try to rule out any other thing that may be causing the symptoms. For example, we look at your interaction with technology. How much time are you spending? Because nowadays you're hearing about young children spending an average of 6 to 7 hours on social media, and that is definitely also affecting their attention span. So the lay person may not be able to do that on their own. I think if there's a person out there who's having that question, the best way to do it is to seek help from a qualified practitioner.
And from my clinical perspective, how is ADHD diagnosed? Like, is it different? I know you mentioned those tests that you do, but are the tests, the standardized test and assessment, different from children and adults?
Yes,
or they cut across?
Still, the most important part of any diagnosis, not just for ADHD, is history. Forget about the assessment tools and all that. Is we collect a detailed history of the person from when they were born. We even collect history of the person before they were born. We want to know what was happening, because when you're pregnant, what were you drinking? What was your health like? What kind of things were you exposed to? What kind of was it normal birth? Was it cesarean section? So those things we still call, that's the most important part of a diagnosis.
The risks of ADHD?
They definitely increase the risk of ADHD. The link, the exact link may not be known specifically, but we know that when there's difficulty in childhood, including the mode of birth, the health of the mother when she was expectant of the child, those can actually make it more likely that a child will have neurodevelopmental conditions. And as you mentioned, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition, meaning that people that have ADHD are born with brains that are different from the average population. How is it so? It turns out that people that have ADHD have a hypoactive, this is what we call the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that is directly behind your forehead. Hypoactive means that it's not as active as the rest of your brain. It does not receive enough oxygen. So why is that part of the brain important? Because that part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for what we call the executive functioning. Your ability to focus, your ability to think before you act, your ability to plan, your ability to coordinate while you're doing multiple things at the same time. And it's no surprise why also people that have ADHD will struggle with those same things that part of the brain is supposed to be responsible for. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Yugi. And there's a general belief that ADHD is most of the time underdiagnosed or overdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. What is your professional take on this?
I think both three things are correct. ADHD has been undiagnosed among girls. Thank God we're now diagnosing girls who have ADHD. The ADHD has also been definitely overdiagnosed. So we're talking about, like, for example, we've spoken about how technology can actually fragment your attention span. So I think people whose attention span has been fragmented by technology do not have ADHD. They need to just look into the relationship with their gadget and things are going to be fixed. Also, we tend to diagnose ADHD among people who have a drug-related problem. And yes, you can have both at the same time, but a drug addiction or alcohol addiction can also trigger symptoms of ADHD. What is the third thing that you mentioned?
Misdiagnosed.
Or misdiagnosed, yes. Yes, ADHD is also commonly misdiagnosed as the common misdiagnoses of ADHD include things like anxiety, depression, especially among girls. It tends to really mimic depression. Also other conditions like even bipolar. So it can be easily misdiagnosed, and that's why you really need to seek help from a qualified practitioner who knows how to tell the difference.
Let's talk a little bit about myths. As I mentioned earlier, so many health conditions have always surrounded by several myths, some of which need really to be debunked by professionals just to make sure that people have the right information out there. Is ADHD simply as a result of poor parenting or lack of discipline? Because somebody might think, okay, or maybe there's something I did prior to my conception or during that really predisposed my child to this, or maybe I neglected the early signs that I couldn't diagnose this during childhood. What would you say?
You've mentioned several things. I don't know which one to attack first.
You can start with I was just giving an example, like, is it about poor parenting?
No, poor parenting, definitely not. But good parenting can actually provide the conditions for an ADHD child to thrive. So poor parenting is not going to cause ADHD, but poor parenting is going to make life, which is already a living hell for a kid with ADHD, more of a living hell. So good parenting is absolutely crucial, but it's not going to cause it. But the things that you've mentioned, like the things that happen before the child is born, can actually predispose a kid to ADHD. So make sure that if you're pregnant, eat healthy, take care of yourself, avoid stresses as much as you possibly can, or handle them well, and those would make it less likely that the kid will have it.
But still, with those, it could happen that you get a child with ADHD, right?
It still could happen. There's lots that we are not in control of, and we've mentioned genetics is actually a very strong predictive factor. That even if you have the perfect conditions, but there's a genetic predisposition, it could still predispose ADHD. Yeah.
There has been a lot of conversation on screen time among children, toddlers specifically. And even yesterday, there was a report by BBC capping the screen time for toddlers to 1 hour per day. Is there any link between excessive screen time and ADHD?
I can't really refer to a specific study about the amount of screen time connected to ADHD. I don't think it'll cause ADHD. I think screen time would make it very difficult for a kid who already has ADHD because they have an interest-based brain. And as you know, the social media algorithm, if they're on social media, will give them the exact kind of thing that they're interested in. So that means that they'll intensely focus on the phone and social media and not be able to focus on things that actually matter, like education. But we also know that even when a child does not have ADHD, with a lot of excessive screen time, they over time will start mimicking symptoms of ADHD. And this is now what we talked about, an overdiagnosis, where we are diagnosing kids who don't have ADHD with ADHD when the real problem is actually the gadget. Yeah.
You mentioned 3 types of ADHD disorders. Now, for someone out there who's grappling with ADHD, or somebody who has not been diagnosed, or a guardian or parent with a child with this condition, is there a possibility that they can outgrow it if diagnosed early, particularly, or it's a lifelong condition?
ADHD, unfortunately, like many other conditions, are all lifelong conditions. But lifelong does not mean that you have to be on medication forever, for eternity. You know, a lot of people with proper management, with sometimes with therapy, sometimes with a combination of both therapy and medication, they get into full remission. Full remission means that you still have the condition, but the symptoms are no longer manifesting because you've created a proper support system, a proper structure, and you still go to therapy once in a while, and you go to church. Church actually helps, spirituality. Or you exercise, you do sports, and you can live a perfectly normal life, still have some symptoms, but still also benefit from the good sides of ADHD. As you know, we spoke about ability and disability. People that have ADHD may also have an intense ability to focus, what we call hyperfocus. So when they find something that they're really interested in, they may focus in a way that most people can't. So they may be able to tap into the benefits and also minimize the disadvantages and lead a very normal life. It's not that they've outlived it. They still have it, but they've managed, but they've figured out a way of living
a fulfilling life.
a fulfilling life even with the symptoms.
Let's talk about the emotional and psychological consequences of ADHD, particularly if it's not treated or managed, because you mentioned that it is possible to live a fulfilling life. That is if it's diagnosed and then it is managed as per the available modalities. What are these emotional, psychological consequences of ADHD that is not diagnosed or managed?
I'm going to mention one, and one because I see this quite often. One of the common things that you'll hear from a person that has ADHD after they've gotten diagnosed with the condition is, not just after they've gotten diagnosed and they've been put on treatment. The question that I keep hearing my clients ask is, where have you been all my life? Where have you been all my life? So for me, it's almost like when you give them the medication, the first time that you give them the medication, they realize instantly that life was either too fast for them and they were too slow, or vice versa. They were too fast and the world was too slow for them. And for the very first time, they feel at par with everybody else and with the world. That's just how powerful getting on treatment can actually be. So imagine having ADHD and never ever experiencing that. So it's a life of a lot of failures. It's a life of knowing that I have so much potential, but for some reason I'm not able to realize it. So it's a lot. We talk about the psychological impact of not getting a diagnosis. The most common thing that you see is frustration, and I see a lot of resentment. I am as smart as the people that I see around me, but for some reason, or even smarter than them, but for some reason I'm not able to perform as good as they are. So it's a lot of frustration and pent-up resentment because of a history of failure and a history of not living up to potential.
Great. Now, what treatment modalities are available for ADHD, and do they vary from one person to another, from age brackets?
That's a very good question, and also asked quite well. There are many treatment modalities available, but in a clinical setting, we always ask ourselves, what's the first line treatment? Like before you try anything else, what should a person actually consider? And for ADHD, it's medication. That's the first line treatment for ADHD. Other conditions, like let's say PTSD, the first line treatment for PTSD is exposure therapy, which is not medication. But for ADHD, something that has actually been proven to work better than anything else is medication. But what usually works is a combination of medication, which are usually stimulant medication. There's also non-stimulant ADHD medication. I'm going to be able to get into all of that. A combination of medication and psychotherapy, which is talk therapy. So medication will help balance out. We talked about a hypoactive prefrontal cortex. It will activate that part of the brain, so it will make it much easier for a person with ADHD to focus, to pay attention. They'll be less hyperactive. But now psychotherapy will focus on things like emotional regulation, because they tend to be quite emotionally dysregulated. It will focus on helping them build the structure that they need to live a healthy, balanced life. For example, one thing that usually works for people with ADHD is before you, the day before you're supposed to do something, like for me, before I came to this interview, before I went to bed last night, I knew exactly what I needed to wear. I ironed it, I put it aside, and also polished my shoes. So it might seem like something mundane, but it's very, very important for a person who may have ADHD. Why? Because if they try to do that in the morning, they may spend 2 hours trying to figure out what they're going to wear. So planning ahead ahead of time, or making sure that you put your clothes aside, making sure that you do today what you're supposed to do tomorrow. If you have the time to do it today, helps. And that's what therapy may focus on, building the structure around the person. Sometimes a person may say that I don't want it to be on medication, so they may try psychotherapy alone. It's much harder to do it without medication. If
it work effectively?
If the symptoms are severe, I would actually recommend medication. But I've met many people who psychotherapy alone was enough. But psychotherapy not alone, because psychotherapy involves a lot of things. Within psychotherapy, we'll still recommend things like exercise, physical exercise, which works a lot with people who have ADHD and so on and so forth. Yeah.
And does the type of ADHD also determine the type of treatment modality, like if it's psychotherapy or the antidote medicines or the combination of both?
Yeah, no, for all three types of ADHD types, predominantly hyperactive, predominantly inattentive, and combined, both for all three, the first line treatment is still medication, but a combination of medication and psychotherapy is best. Yeah.
It is very difficult, especially among men, to get to that level of, okay, I feel something is wrong with me, let me just go and seek some medical treatment, because you say no normal person can tell that this is ADHD. It could be you're just misdiagnosing, like you pointed out earlier. For men, especially men, find it really difficult to seek medical attention, and they are also not immune to this disorder. What is your experience with them, and how best can those who are close to them help them?
Yeah, for men it's a bit tricky, because there's a lot of factors that are men-specific. For example, men on average are less likely to open up about anything compared to women. That's something that we're trying to change. But it's hard to change, because part of it is biology, part of it is socialization, and part of it is maybe individual differences. But then there's also structural issues that may make it. The mental health industry is 80% women, 20% men. Men tend to be much more likely to open up when they're speaking to other men. The women in the mental health industry are doing an excellent job. But the number of men also in the industry is not enough, nowhere near enough. I think if you had more men, then we would probably have more men opening up. So there's a lot of individual, there's a lot of gender-specific factors, but there's also a lot of structural factors that maybe it's more of a governmental role to try to sort out.
And what role do caregivers, teachers, and partners play in supporting individuals with ADHD upon now diagnosis, and now they have been put on medication or management therapy? What role are they supposed to play to help this person?
Parents can play a huge role. You need to create the conditions to allow your child to thrive. Parents also need to understand that their child is wired differently. And if you talk about ability and disability, make sure both. It's almost like people that have ADHD we call them also neurodivergent. The correct way to look at it is we have a world full of right-handers. Are you right-handed?
Yeah.
Yeah, a majority of people
are you left-handed?
No, I'm right-handed. So a majority of people on planet Earth are right-handers. So everything, including doorknobs, handles, sometimes even cups, everything is designed to accommodate the majority of the population who are right-handed.
Yes,
but then we still have about less than 10% of the population who are left-handers. So for them, they sort of have to just adjust, because everything seems to have been created putting in mind right-handers. So in the same way, imagine having a child who is a circle but the whole world is full of squares. So you have to treat them sort of differently. They have an interest-based brain, but other children that you have may have a different kind of a brain, where for them it doesn't really matter whether they're interested in, they can focus on anything. So even maybe when it comes to education, now CBC is much better because they can focus more on what they actually like. So parents may need to understand that the child is wired a bit differently and may need a different kind of a structure compared to the others. Partners may need to understand that the person is also going to struggle with certain things, but they're also going to be incredibly good at others. But in as much as we say that parents, teachers, and partners need to understand the patient also in therapy is taught to understand that it might be harder for other people to understand him. So we also teach clients not to expect that the world is going to bend to their favor or to their will. That's just how the world is. You're going to struggle at certain things, you're going to be good at other things. You might need to learn other things in order to be able to sustain a relationship. So it's not just, the responsibility does not just fall on the people that are around the person diagnosed with ADHD. The responsibility also falls on the client or the person that has ADHD. And that's what we try to teach them in therapy. And
have you experienced in your line of duty a situation where a person that has been making progress end up relapsing because of the laxity on the part of the caregivers?
I would not really call relapsing, because when you say relapse, I'm thinking about an alcohol addiction. but I've had clients whereby therapy was working and the medication was clearly working, but there's certain factors, family related, parent related, parenting style related, that made it very difficult for us to sustain that kind of, we call it a purple patch, when they're actually experiencing good symptoms and they're getting better, where they sort of regressed because of certain conditions were not met, and those were beyond what we're doing in therapy, what the client actually has control of. So yes, we've had situations whereby, despite the fact what we're doing in therapy and what the doctor is doing with medication, it's not really bearing a lot of fruits.
Thank you. Now, on speaking of alcohol, there are several information or articles on ADHD. Some of them mention that people with ADHD have a high tendency of being alcohol or substance abusers. How true is this from where you stand?
It's not just alcohol, it's not just substance abuse, it's also about any kind of addiction. ADHD, people that have ADHD are indeed, on average, much more likely to indulge excessively in anything. It's about, there's a dopamine deficiency in an ADHD brain. So part of the reason why they struggle, they're always hyperactive, is because they've got a dopamine deficiency. So it's almost like I don't have enough dopamine, so I have to compensate or overcompensate by my hyperactivity. So in the same way, a dopamine deficiency can actually make a person tilt towards all types of addiction, behavioral addiction like pornography, gambling, and food addiction. It can also make them tilt towards sex addiction. It can also, like was mentioned, make them tilt more towards phone addiction and also drug and substance abuse. So indeed, statistics do indicate, and multiple studies do indicate that people that have ADHD are much more likely to start using drugs early. They're much more likely to experiment on multiple drugs, and they're much more likely to get addicted to drugs, and they're also much less likely to recover from an addiction. It's much harder to get a person who has ADHD out of an addiction than the average person that does not have ADHD.
And do they have control over it, or this is something that can keep on escalating until they have to get the diagnosis and the treatment?
Of course, because most of the people that maybe we'll see in our practice are people who come presenting with addiction first. And then when we're digging deeper, we realize that this person has been having ADHD all along. They resorted to alcohol and drugs as a way of coping. So it can actually be addressed. Yeah, it can actually be addressed. It doesn't mean that it has to escalate always and all the time, but it can actually be addressed.
Now, what practical strategies can individuals living with ADHD adopt to improve focus and maybe daily functioning in their specific areas, be it in education, workspace, or even performance generally?
First of all, if you suspect that you have it, get a formal diagnosis and get formally treated. And after that, some of these skills that I'm going to maybe mention a few, you'll learn them in therapy. But what we know is because they have an interest-based brain, what can work for a person who has ADHD, maybe if you're doing something that you're not as interested in, you can combine it with something that you're interested in. So for example, I am not interested in learning math, but how can I better learn math? By combining it with something that I enjoy. I can be listening to my favorite music while I'm learning math. So that seems to be helping. Something else that helps people who have ADHD to focus and to pay attention is when the environment is good. For example, when there's a lot going on, when there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of noise, they may really struggle to pay attention. So they might need a much more of a quiet room. Some people perform or concentrate better with what we call brown noise, white noise, or playing the sound of rain while they're studying. So there's multiple things that they can do, but I still insist very much is that if you suspect that you have it, get a formal diagnosis first. And those things that I've mentioned only come as secondary.
For parents that are watching and guardians, what are some of the immediate steps that they can take to support a child that has already been diagnosed with ADHD? Because some of them could be under the care of their parents, others may be under the care of guardians, but they still need support because this is now a child. For an adult, like you say, the power is in your hands and you have control of whatever that you need to do.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to have a neurodevelopmental, a neurodivergent a child. Of course, I'm assuming that you're asking about a parent who's already gotten them formal treatment. They're seeing a psychologist and they're helping them with emotional regulation. And if it need be, because not all children are going to be put on medication, they're already put on medication. So they're asking about what other supplementary things parents can do. Make sure that the diet is right, feed them a healthy, balanced diet. A child that has ADHD may need more play than the average child. The problem that we have in today's world is that parents have replaced what we used to call a play-based childhood with a phone-based childhood. So parents are much more willing to allow their children to spend endless amounts of time on their tablets or on their phones that allow them to go out and play because of the dangers that we hear about. So I think parents need to encourage the children to play more, to go out and be around their friends and get injured, get hurt, learn how to cooperate with others in play, and especially ADHD children need that. They need to, it's sort of like they need to blow off steam, and if you don't allow them to do that, then things are going to be difficult. Yeah, so just the basic things that parents do, but with an ADHD child, you have to be very, very careful.
Now, at Chiromo Hospital Group, what exactly do you offer? Is there something unique or special in as far as care for people with ADHD is concerned, and even other conditions?
With ADHD, the special thing that we offer that many other people may not offer is a wide variety of treatment options, a wide variety of psychiatrists. We have psychiatrists who've specialized in ADHD, like that's the thing that they're known for. And we also have a support group for adults who have ADHD, where they meet on a regular basis, and with the help of a moderator, they support each other. Yeah, it's one of the, I think, the oldest support groups in the country for ADHD individuals.
Someone, Lillian, asking about stigma in society, and that also reminds me of an important question that we should have addressed. How much of a stigma or lack of awareness in community prevents people from seeking diagnosis and treatment for ADHD?
The stigma, the other way of looking at stigma is like the mark of Cain. So stigma does prevent people from seeking help. We know there's a lot of negative connotation attached to mental health, not just ADHD in general. And what we're doing as Chiromo Hospital Group, like I mentioned, we also do corporate talks. It's to try to break the stigma by giving people information. When people have information, when people know that it's okay to not be okay, they're much more likely to seek help. So yes, stigma is a huge problem. The stigma with ADHD that you commonly see with parents is parents attributing or labeling children as lazy because they struggle with ADHD. That is stigma. That is what we call stigma. But maybe with proper psychoeducation, because we also psychoeducate parents, when you diagnose their kids with ADHD, then they may learn that this is not laziness. This is just symptoms that can be treated, and the child can be okay.
On coexisting conditions, you mentioned there's anxiety, depression, and bipolar, among others. How does that complicate diagnosis and treatment if somebody happens to have ADHD alongside these coexisting conditions?
It complicates it because you're treating multiple things at the same time, and some of those symptoms are overlapping, and sometimes it's hard to know which one to address first, or whether those medication, if you're, for example, if you're taking bipolar medication and ADHD, how they may affect each other. Okay,
so every condition is treated separately.
Every condition is addressed individually and uniquely. Yeah, but sometimes I see psychiatrists when maybe you have two conditions at the same time, they're also much more careful when it comes to choosing the medication, because some medication, this chemical reaction can react and can cause more harm than good.
Great, and of course, Mwende says, thank you, my all-time Catholic TV, you're welcome. And of course, our time is up, but as usual, give our guest a few seconds just to give his parting shot in regards to ADHD before we close this conversation.
Thank you very much. ADHD is a problem that is becoming increasingly important to understand, and I think anybody out there who suspects that they may have it, because people nowadays get diagnoses even on TikTok, it's not self-diagnose. Seek help from a qualified practitioner, and help is actually available. Like I mentioned earlier, there's plenty of people who have ADHD and they perform really, really well. So receiving a diagnosis is not a death sentence. You can have it and still be able to perform to the very best of your ability. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Linus Oyugi, for your time and for the great insights into ADHD. And I believe it will help someone out there. We are pleased to have had you on the Health Discourse show, and we wish you all the best in all that you do in your field.
Thank you.
Great, and many thanks, dear viewer, for being with us since we started. We've learned quite a lot on ADHD, about indiscipline or poor parenting. All those, there's several myths on that we've been holding about this neurodevelopmental condition that can affect both children and adults. One of the required awareness, early diagnosis, and of course proper care use. So if someone around you is presenting with any of the signs and symptoms that we spoke about in this conversation, persistent inattention, impulsivity, or hyperactivity, you have had the very first step to do is to seek professional guidance. Early intervention, he says, can make a very significant difference. You have been watching Health Discourse Conversations That Heal with me, Sasha Elizabeth, where we bring you conversation that inform, empower, and transform lives. And of course, if you missed this conversation, find it on our digital platforms, on our timelines on Facebook and YouTube. The links will be available as well on our website. So see you next time. Goodbye. Yeah.
Ninakushukuru Baba Mungu wangu kwa mema unayonitendea Baba, siku zote ni.
The Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Meru, together with the priests, parish council, and faithful, joyfully invites you to the inauguration of Our Lady of Mercy, Miathene Parish. This momentous occasion will take place on 12th April 2026 at Our Lady of Mercy, Miathene Catholic Church, starting at 10 a.m. The Holy Mass will be presided over by His Lordship Right Reverend Jackson Murugara, Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Meru. This event will be brought to you live on Capuchin TV and streamed across all our social media platforms. Come, be part of this blessed milestone. Join in prayer, fellowship, and thanksgiving as the parish begins a new chapter in faith. Keep watching Capuchin TV, your staunchly Catholic identity channel.
Ninakushukuru Baba Mungu wangu kwa mema unayonitendea Baba, siku zote ninawaza jinsi gani
For 40 years, a journey of transformation, a legacy of impact, a future full of promise. Tangaza University celebrates 4 decades of shaping leaders, inspiring minds, and transforming lives. And now, we invite you to be part of this historic milestone. Join the Tangaza University Jubilee Walk 2026, happening on 11th April this year, right here at Tangaza University. Work for a cause, support needy students, help expand infrastructure, and empower the next generation of transformative leaders. Every contribution counts. The Jubilee celebrations begin with a special Holy Mass on Thursday, 26th March at 12:20 p.m., marking the official opening of the Jubilee year. A moment of thanksgiving, reflection, and renewal, and will be brought to you live on Capuchin TV and streamed across all our social media platforms. Tangaza alumni, friends, partners, let us come together once again as one community and work for a purpose. Be part of the journey, be part of the legacy. Keep watching Capuchin TV, your staunchly Catholic identity channel.
Education is the seed of mission. Formation is the foundation of service. We invite your participation of faith, fellowship and purpose to contribute to Spiritan Endowment Fund for the formation and education of Spiritan missionaries.
As a superior of the Kenyan South Sudan, we take in students for formation. But it has been challenging. We have had initiatives to see that we are able to form missionaries, to educate them to go out and serve.
The Spiritan missionaries serve where the need is greatest, bringing education where there are no schools, bringing hope where there is despair, bringing Christ where faith is newly born.
The Holy Ghost Fathers have done a lot in this country. They have helped in nurturing people in spiritual life, building hospitals to heal the sick, and also setting up educational facilities in many parts of the country that has assisted to uplift the lives of many vulnerable people. So they serve in difficult areas like Pokot, like Turkana, Garissa, etc. And if you go to the ground, they have done a lot of work.
We have a number of initiatives. We had a family fundraiser that we do it every year, but that's for a direct expense. We have now come up through the board with an endowment fund where we do annual dinners that will be able, through this fund, to invest to generate more funds for formation. This kind of a sustainable way of having this formation continue.
Your generous support will help educate and form missionaries committed to fast evangelization and service to the most vulnerable communities around the world.
Commit to give any little amount or whatever you can to the endowment fund, and that will go a long way in educating our young people.
Every sponsorship is an investment in mission. Every contribution is a gift to the future of evangelization.
The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. We still need to form many more young people into priesthood, to help carry out this mission.
To support this mission, kindly make your contribution through After payment, you may send your confirmation message to 0726 779 620 or send an email to the bursar Father George Nzioki CSSP at bursarholyghostfathers@gmail.com. Together, we can prepare missionaries who will serve with compassion, courage, and faith. Be part of this noble cause. Support the Spiritan Endowment Fund. Empower Formation, Strengthen Mission, Transform Lives. Spiritan Endowment Fund. For more information, contact the Counselor of Formation, Father Henry Omoyo, CSSP, on 0729 612 409. Spiritan Missionaries, serving where the need is greatest. Keep watching Capuchin TV, your staunchly Catholic identity channel. Unwell, seeking expert medical care that prioritizes both your health and well-being? Welcome to St. Mary's Mission Hospital, Langata, where compassionate care meets cutting-edge medicine. At St. Mary's, we believe in providing holistic health care. Our dedicated team of healthcare professionals is committed to delivering personalized care to each and every patient. Nestled in the heart of Langata, our hospital offers a peaceful and healing environment for patients to recover and thrive.
We have masses every day, weekdays at 6:30 a.m. in the morning and also in the evening at 6:30 p.m.
Your health is our top priority. Experience the difference with compassionate care you can trust. Whether you're in need of routine medical care, specialized treatment, or emergency services, St. Mary's Mission Hospital, Langata is here for you. We offer a comprehensive range of services including outpatient, inpatient services, laboratory services, comprehensive care clinic, MCH and maternity, ophthalmology, pharmacy services, radiology and sonography, dental services, pediatrics, physiotherapy, ICU and HDU services, dialysis.
Here we do dialysis for kidney failed patients, and we do it from Monday through Saturday. We welcome you all. We accept all insurances and cash.
Specialist clinics and CT scan services,
Experience your health difference with us. Visit us at Langata or our branches in Nairobi at Cardinal OTUNGA PLAZA and in Rift Valley, Elementaita, Nakuru County. For more information, contact us at 0797 972 794 or 0769 781 880 or 0717 305 204 or email us at info@stmarysmissionhospital.co.ke. St. Mary's Mission Hospital, Langata. Compassionate in healthcare.
Vocational skills are essential in inspiring, owing to creativity, making students achieve their goals and have a fruitful future in their careers. Vocational Training and Production Center, located at St. Benedict Catholic Church along Thika Road, run and managed by Benedictine Fathers.
The college itself is located in Nairobi, just along Thika Road, Super Highway, and opposite our parish, that is St. Benedict Parish, and also again opposite our primary school, that is St. Benedict Primary School. We are rooted in Benedictine spirituality. That is why we are trying to bring light to the blind, light, to be light to those who are less fortunate, those who are challenged.
We are in a modern world where we need technology, and it is being advanced. Vocational Training Production Center, students are in a position to also to learn with an OBD tool. This tool helps to identify any problem that is being found at the car.
We offer quality and excellent courses by instilling knowledge and skills to our young people. Our profound and impressive courses include motor vehicle mechanics, welding and plumbing, carpentry and joinery, cosmetology, and computer studies.
We want to welcome you, to invite you to come and see what we do. We train and we also produce. We want to take this moment to invite all the students. If you are there, you have finished Form 4, you have also completed Class 8. Tafadhali kuja uone ile kitu venye tunasomesha watu.
Sisi tunafunza wanafunzi wawe na skills zile zitawasaidia. Our trainees don't fail. Actually, we have no failure in VTPC.
Our institution is equipped with learning facilities, and we have dedicated, qualified trainers in all sections.
We have experienced professional and dedicated tutors who have taught for quite some time, and so they are well equipped and they know what our students, what our learners need to fit in our society. We also learn and work with those who are slow learners. We know that we are gifted differently, and we are here to accommodate all.
We are progressing in our January intake. All are welcome.
Enrollment is ongoing. Visit us or call us on 0703 290 928 or email us on benedictinevtpc@gmail.com.
We do diploma and certificate.
and we take all students. It doesn't matter whether we have a grade or we don't have. We deal with all peoples and you are most welcome.
Enroll with us today for excellent training. We instill knowledge and skills through innovations.
We accommodate all, so please come and journey with us in our school.